Yeah, well, certainly the wellness issue is as much a community issue as it is a part of the employment structure going forward. And the issue of the millennials and the skill sets coming out are very interesting because we have 14th century institutions at best educating to 20th century skill sets and values. And we have to rethink the content and curriculum and offering and the skill sets that are needed. And Mike, as we pass it over to you, the millennials say that they feel more job security and entrepreneurship than they do in working for the corporate entity anymore. Their parents have validated that by the diminishing role of their pensions and so forth, that they had every expectation and perceived right that the corporations would take care of them, and that's not happened. And that's created a disenchantment to the point where when you started SecureWorks, it probably would have been a different story. But at this point now, the youth are actually perceiving that your venue in entrepreneurship. I know you've been an overnight success in SecureWorks, but can you tell us a little bit about that overnight success?
So let me first say that I think the work that Sam and the Chamber, and I'm going to give Tino a shout out here, is really important and is making a change in the Atlanta community. And I'm going to hold the flag up for high technology here because so I joined SecureWorks 8.5 years ago, and we got the ball rolling, and Stephen was laughing because we had about 90 days after I joined, we had about 35 employees, and today we have almost 700. And I hate to say this in a group of HR people, but we have almost 100 openings, and budget next year is going to be to hire 100 to 150 people. What's a little bit different from the unemployment numbers we're talking about, and I don't know if Ricky Steele was giving this to me because we're pushing him to help us fill some of these positions, but what I was told was the unemployment rate for technology people in Atlanta is under 3%. And I know we have struggled to bring new people on board. Our offices are in Chicago, Atlanta, Providence, just on the outskirts of Boston, Myrtle Beach, where we haven't had a hard time trying to move people, particularly young college grads from the Northeast. And then we have one in London and Edinburgh. And I know you're going to be sad to hear this, but I don't care where we put people. I'd love to bring them personally to Atlanta, but we can't find them. So, we're at the other end of the spectrum from a growth perspective. It has been different in that as we've gotten bigger, I think there's more people that find it not to be quite the family it was when we were 35 or 50 or 100 people, although all employees in our company have equity in the company. And we're pushing hard to really focus on the cultural fit of the organization and to make sure people are with us and can produce from a long-term perspective. But I think the growth from a high-tech community perspective, and when we meet on the chambers, particularly the internet security silo, the biggest part of the conversation is we can't find the talent. I know the talent pool is great in Atlanta, and that's what the survey results say, but trying to find enough people that have a technology background. We're actually doing some roundtables at Georgia Tech and are looking to hopefully expand it to bring more people into the area or to help train more of the students who will stay here to help us fill the positions.
Well, I have several questions I'd like to ask of the panel. Given the time frame, I'd like to open to the audience to see if there are some questions for our panelists. By their ideas, they are known, so you know them, Stephen.
Can I just add one comment to give you a personal example? A gentleman we moved to Atlanta about 8 years ago lives up in, I guess he's northern Gwinnett County area, up off Sugarloaf Parkway. And he's moved his children into a private school. This was all done within the last 60 days. And his comment to me was there's 3 new elementary schools that have been built around their neighborhood. And the one his children are in, which filled up immediately, only 1/3 of the classrooms now are occupied because they've increased the size of the classrooms, reduced the number of teachers, taken the aides out, and squished them all into fewer classrooms. And he said the teachers are putting their hands up and basically saying this all happened this year, or saying there's nothing we can do. The classroom sizes are too big and we can't deal with it. So they basically went to one of the local elementary schools. So I don't mean to jump on you before you answer the question.
Well, first, I think that we have to treat it like the problem it is and put the energy into fixing it in a more radical way than we have in the past. And I don't know whether that will ultimately be more aggressive use of charters to compete against the local school system, but it certainly won't be to abandon them. But I think that we're coming to a tipping point, if you will, and I see the energy already moving through the city where we're going to convene a group of people and take a more radical approach, including Georgia Tech, including some of the leading charters such as Kip Ways, including leaders such as Sam Williams and John Rice, who's the vice chairman of GE, who's done as much as education in Atlanta as anyone. And I'm going to have to play a more robust role. I mean, I don't mind fielding the question, but the school board is not mine. I do not control it. It is completely separate from me. But I don't believe that that's going to be a winning position for the mayor going forward, because we have to address this quality of school issue. And in order to attract the kind of investment, people are going to want more control. I mean, I talked to the leading philanthropist in this city. There is a great deal of capital on the sidelines that is willing to play in Atlanta education in exchange for a radically different level of involvement and control. So I believe that we're getting through that point. I think right now we had to get through the cheating scandal and all of the rest, and the challenges around a superintendent who are going to be leaving at the end of the year. And I think at that moment, we will be in a strong position. But I also wanted to say this. Where the school system, as challenged as it is right now, has come in the last decade, Sam, versus where it was, is a quantum leap in terms of having any city of Atlanta schools that you could send your children to. So I think that I approach it in this way. The next place we're going is radically different. But if we make the kind of progress that we made between 2000 and 2010, then we'll be real competitors. But between 1990 and 2000, Sam, the city of Atlanta school system, and Sam and I went through these wars together, had 4 superintendents. Yeah. So it was so bad that you couldn't even keep a leader. We now have had 1 superintendent. We made a number of reforms, and we've had increasing test scores, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. Now in 2010 through 2020, we're going to have to turbocharge that, be more radical, and be more aggressive. And Georgia Tech's going to be a partner in that, the Atlanta University Center, and Emory University. And then we've got to make the hard decisions to release the private capital into the problem, which is going to require some sacrifice and some political risk on my part. But I was involved in the reform earlier, so I'm willing to put skin in the game for it. But you should know, in a room of folk as serious as you all are, that there is an extraordinary amount of work being done so that as Dr. Hall ends this period of time in her tenure, that we use this moment to be more aggressive about it without, ending up on the front page of the AJC.
Well, and I'd like to echo Ed's comment to tell you that the Metro Atlanta Chamber is not going to back away from public education, no matter what the AJC may say. We think that business has to hold public education accountable for the sake of our own children as well as for the sake of sustainable workforce. And business has a place at the table. Certainly, we're not the dictators. But for some people to say, we don't think business ought to have anything to say about school board governance or who gets elected to the school board, and how dare you contribute money to ask people to run for the school board. Well, that's just heresy. And I got 2 words for those kind of people. Too bad. We're here to stay.
And business certainly has every right to express the skill sets needed, both from their employees and also their families as well. Let's get one. I think we'll have time just for one more question, please.
The story is much better than you know. And I say that because I can point out 4 huge steps that 10 years, I spent 11 years in the Senate and the House, would never have happened in the last 200 days. The passage of the Regional Transportation Bill with the mayor of Atlanta the president of the chamber, the lieutenant governor, speaker, and governor of the state of Georgia in an election year, moving a bill that will be, if passed, the biggest tax increase in the history of the state of Georgia, although done by referendum.
Yeah.
That never would have happened just 4 years ago. And at the bill signing, to have all of the members present. That's one example. If you look at the tolling around Georgia 400, Governor Perdue, a Republican governor, just kept the toll on so that we would have more money for infrastructure investment in an election year. Never would have happened just 4 years ago. I'm in a meeting at the White House with the chairman of the Georgia Port Authority. The executive at the White House is sitting there looking at me, wondering why the mayor of Atlanta is sitting in a meeting asking for $105 million for investment in the Georgia Port Authority. Never would have happened 4 years ago. The point I'm making is you can't run out and talk about this publicly as much as I would like to, because you'll get your friends beat. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, this is a true story.
Yeah.
When you sit in a meeting at the Georgia State Capitol, the conversation starts by "don't get me beat." I don't want to get beat, and they don't want to get beat. But the reason that I'm telling you this is that there are far more forward-thinking things happening in this town that are being talked about because of the politics of Georgia. So you're having much more rural involvement and much more investment and coordination than we're able to talk about for political reasons, because folks have to go back home and get reelected. And there is a risk when your pairing is too strong with the metro region and you go back to Houston County or other parts of the state. So I mean, I just wanted to, you asked an excellent question, but I don't want to keep leaving the notion out there. We just passed a weighted voting measure in the Atlanta Regional Commission that never would have passed 2 years ago. It was a measure that said that in the future we'll be looking at transportation projects by the amount of money that you put in and the size of your population. That is radical for Georgia, because the past was that was how you kept rural control. It didn't matter how many people I represented. I just outvoted you. So those are 4 specific examples, all happening real time right now in the state of Georgia. That's why I'm saying you should bet on this region, and we're going to be just fine.
We have just a few minutes left.
I'm sorry for the long answer.
No problem, Mary. I'd like to have some parting comments from each of our panelists, and throw one other aspect into it, and that is that global reach. Not only just regional, but our global touch is very strong, and stronger than many recognize or represent as well. But I'd like each of you to make a parting comment and possibly reflect on that as well. Mike?
So I think a good example of that, and I'm not in the credit card transaction processing business, but I think, Sam, you may be able to help me. We do about a third.
Two-thirds.
Two-thirds of the credit card transaction processing in the world
area.
Right here.
goes through Atlanta. So from a global perspective, I think you can get a pretty good sense from a technology perspective of what we do. The one comment I'd leave, and I'll make it brief, is that I think that this group of people has a tremendous opportunity to impact, again, waving the technology flag, helping industry here in Atlanta from the technology perspective get and retain qualified people and attract them to the Atlanta market. I think you're, square bullseye in that position.
Ed?
It goes back to education, I think, to a great degree. In terms of the global part of it, I wish we would pay less attention to China and more attention to South America. Everyone's going after China. Take a number, whether it's delegations, offices opened, or belief that the Chinese train of cash is coming our way is in my mind, it's gotten to the point of ridiculous. But we're connected to South America. You look at where Delta's headed moving forward. You talk about land of opportunity, proximity. Let's find a new market as opposed to following everyone else, which is what's happening around America.
And the emerging market success of the last few years has been there, even more so.
Absolutely.
Sam?
Well, I'd like to build on something the mayor said, and that is that there is a lot more regional cooperation than you might know about. I think water, the crisis around water has brought the region's leaders together to figure out with the state, with our partners, how are we going to solve the water crisis? And I think I'd attribute it to the leadership in the state now to say this is a state problem. This is not Atlanta's problem. There used to be the day, perhaps 10 years ago, when there would be people that say, you know, we don't care what happens to Atlanta. If they don't have any water, they quit growing and the jobs will move down here to us. That was a popular theory in many rural legislators. Believe me, they believe it. Believe it, Steve. But I think that's changed now. We've seen the governor go out on the stump and actually talk about water as a state problem. So that's a good thing. The other good thing is that the leaders within our region have quit fighting each other. I remember the day when Gwinnett County Commission chairman would love to fight with the city of Atlanta. Wayne Hill and Bill Campbell hated each other and the media loved it. We don't do that anymore. This mayor is following the whole regional partnership. He's out talking to leaders, business leaders at the North Fulton Chamber and others around this region. So that helps us bring together in the time of crisis. And I think the crisis is helping us sort of, as my father used to tell me, that your character is defined in times of crisis, not in times of opulence. And the character of this city right now is really being defined. Now, to touch on the global thing, I think we're just skyrocketing in global trade. And I can tell you from the chamber, what we do is we sit down and look at a global map and we say, anywhere Delta is planning on flying, that's where we're going. We're going to ride their coattails. The first thing we're going to do is try to create a bilateral business opportunity there with the bilateral chamber. And then we want a consul general office. And by the way, the Brazilian consul general, to Ed points, is the second largest in Atlanta now. We just got them last year. And then when you do those things, trade will expand. And I'm going to ask the mayor to talk about some of the things that he's doing to expand that. But we couldn't do it if it wasn't for Hartsfield. But we now have 62 consul generals in Atlanta. That's a lot of international business. I can remember before the Olympics, you heard somebody talking a foreign language in the elevator, you'd turn around and look at them. we don't even think about it anymore. I mean, you know, go to the international farmers market. You can find food and culture and languages that are rich from all over this world. So we're there. We're 25% of the companies that moved to Metro Atlanta last year were international companies. In the Olympics, we had 1,000 international companies. Today, we have 2,200 international companies here. They're not the Fortune 500s, but they're really growing.
Mayor Reed, you properly have the last word.
No, thank you. Well, Ed would be pleased because Sam and I started this morning having breakfast with mayors and leaders from Brazil this morning. So I will just give you a brief summary of the facts. Last week, the U.S. State Department hosted a delegation of 40 ambassadors to the United States from literally all around the world. The diplomatic corps is 159 countries that send ambassadors to the United States. They voted overwhelmingly to come to the city of Atlanta and spend 3 days examining us in every single way. By vote, they selected us. The last city that they were in was the city of Chicago. On November 14th through the 16th, we will host the America's Competitiveness Forum. 34 ministers of finance will be in the city of Atlanta. We're standing up a robust international affairs department in the city of Atlanta. We're investing $1.6 billion in an international terminal. It's going to add 12 new gates and give us direct pathways to 84 international cities. So we're not just talking about it, we're living it in a very real way.
Why don't you close with sustainability? Your sustainability program.
Oh, sure. Well, we're announcing our broad sustainability program on Monday of next week. And we are identifying a number of partners that are going to move the city of Atlanta, bottom line, into the top 10 sustainable cities in the United States of America. We've moved from 34 by objective standards, Ed, to 18, and the next path for us is to go to 10. So I assembled a group of specialists. They've identified a number of measures that we need to undertake so that we're in the top 10 in the United States of America. We will launch that on Monday, and we have extraordinary individuals who we're going to announce that are leading that effort. So we're going to win there too.
Ed's just got a pre-announcement now that he can
Already
get
know about
his ABC. All right, well, let's thank our panel, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all got to forgive me. It is my job to be optimistic.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all very much for being here. I would say it's been magnificent. So.